The budget today is all about making choices. Over the last 3 years, we have seen 3 regressive budgets which cut expenditure from essential public services and income of those who could least afford it. We on this side of the House welcome the improvement in the economy and in the government's finances. However, these improvements are not being shared equally in society. Many people have seen no improvement in their situation and in fact are still coping with serious reductions in their incomes and public services that they rely on. On the other hand, some people are seeing a significant improvement in their financial situation. Today is an opportunity to bring a socially balanced budget. For the first time in a number of years, there are available resources. These resources should be allocated to those who need services the most. We need to reinvest in health, education, childcare, social housing and getting people back to work. This will help build a fairer and more caring society. We in Fianna Fáil have learned lessons in recent years, and I believe the public have too. There must be no return to action politics. But anyone looking in today can see this government has learned nothing from the past. And despite your agenda of political reform, you are doing and heading in the opposite direction. There has been an unexpected surge in economic growth in recent months. We must not all blow this immediately. We need to see this economic growth fully bedded in before we start offering tax cuts to the people on highest incomes in order to buy their votes for the next general election. Everybody will understandably welcome a cash improvement in today's budget. However, I will caution this is only half the picture. The government is giving with one hand and taking it back with the other. The new water tax, which came into effect on the 1st of October and for which the bills will arrive early in the new year, will cancel out any of the sweeteners announced by the government here today. Overall, when people weigh up the full picture, most people will be no better off next year. It is also worth remembering that Ireland will be running a deficit next year in the order of almost €6 billion. The government is borrowing money to give it away here today. Surely we have all learned that money we borrow today has to be paid back with interest in the future, and this will leave less money for resources for essential services in the years to come. I look at your document produced here today, and your document tells us that the opening government debt, and it's on page C60 if anyone wants to look at the government figures, the opening government debt at the beginning of 2015 will be €203 billion. The opening government debt at the beginning of 2016 will be €210 billion. The opening government debt at the beginning of 2017 will be €212 billion. And the opening government debt at the beginning of 2018 will be €215 billion. So you are predicting over the next 4 years an increase in the government debt of €12 billion. But yet you're offering tax cuts today, even though we have to borrow to finance those. The actions today are creating a divided society. The gap between the haves and the have-not is widening. Fianna Fáil could have chosen in our budget proposal to cut the top rate of income tax for the highest income earners, but we chose not to do so. We believe resources in the first instance should be directed to improve services for our citizens and to improve the quality of life for all. There are many people waiting for services for unacceptable waiting periods. People cannot get hospital appointments, and the government's response is to give a tax cut to the high earners. Children are in overcrowded classrooms, but the government's response is to give tax cuts to high earners. Critically ill people are waiting for medical cards, but the government's response is to give tax cuts to high earners. We need a programme for suicide prevention, but the government's response is to give tax cuts to the high earners. People are homeless and sleeping in doorways, not 100 yards from this building, but the government's response is to give tax cuts to the high earners. People cannot afford the new water tax, But the government's response is to give tax cuts to high earners. I know the government feels we should all be aboard the train leaving the station. But in your haste, you're leaving many people stranded on the platform. I would ask you to think about the effects you're having on society. A key aspect of budget proposals in relation to the health budget was to rebuild our health services. It is not sufficient just to want to stand still in the delivery of our health services. Nurses, doctors and other frontline staff are under enormous pressure. However, the Department of Health is now projecting a deficit in the HSE of this year of €500 million, and they will again need a supplementary estimate in a month or two's time. There is no surprise that the 2014 health budget was completely bogus, with the agencies in charge of delivering it looking for post-budget verification of the figures after it was announced in the Dáil. So in view of the recent experience, we have to be sceptical when presented with another health budget here today. Personality might have changed in the department, but very little has changed. And we want proof that the health budget will be able to meet the HSE service plan. I have looked at this document, Minister, since we came in here an hour ago. And I look at your expenditure plans. And for anybody listening, the hole in this budget today is in the health estimate. The health estimate for last year was 12.7 billion. The health estimate for 2015 is 13.079. The health estimate for 2016 is 13.253 billion, and the health estimate for 2017 is 13.29 billion. That is a 1.6% increase over 3 years. 0.5% per annum. How anybody thinks you can correct the health services in Ireland with an increase of 0.5% per annum is bad enough you did it this year. It's bad enough that you're doing it next year, but you're now telling the people you're going to do it again in 2016 if you're re-elected, and you're determined to do the same again in 2017. The hole in these figures today is in the health estimate.
Sacrificed again.
I refer you to page 80. I want people to understand where the hole is. I refer you to page 80 of your document that you have published here today. And this is written in note 2. It's very, very small microscopic print. You'd want to go to almost Specsavers to be able to read it, in fact. The addition to the figures provided to the Department of Health in progressing a range of saving measures includes saving measures of 130 million and income generation measures 330 million, estimated to have the potential to support expenditure in 2015. Further details will be provided in the revised estimates volume sometime in the new year. So there's 460 million of a black hole that you will not tell us today how it's being fixed. You are telling us you're going to increase income generation capacity at the HSE for 330 million and another expenditure cut of 130 million. You came in here last year with your expenditure cut of 113 million for your bogus medical card probity, and we saw where that got you. Shambles. And have you learned nothing? 460 million of a black hole. And I want to come especially to where these unspecified savings are, and I can tell you where you talk about them. I go up to page 77 in your booklet here again, and you say, when you're talking about expenditure, to do so will involve a commitment to ongoing reform and efficiency measures and reprioritisation of expenditure as appropriate. That means cancel and cut projects. That's what that. And why won't you tell us here today what's in this estimate? And why have we to wait a couple of months to find these figures coming out? And now, Minister, what I really have to ask you is, these are your figures of income generation measures, 330 million. Is that 330 million made up of additional A&E charges? I'm speaking, Minister. Is it new A&E charges? Is it new prescription charges, which we'll see in the HSE service back? Is it a charge for waiting on a trolley in an A&E unit? That's what it's going to be. When you come into a hospital, you will be asked for your private health insurance number, and they'll say to you, you can have the trolley or the chair, but you're paying €400 a day because you have private health insurance. Where else are you getting the 360 million extra euro? I know where some of it is coming from. You had promised free GP care for the under 6s last year. It did not happen. And still you have to get a supplementary estimate to balance your books. But we saw the hint of it the other day. The new minister has said there might be a nominal fee for the free GP card. So how much will this nominal fee be for the under 6s GP card? He said those words. They are not my words, they're your minister's words. So, Minister, when you come in here with a budget and you talk about increasing expenditure for health, when you're talking about a 0.5% increase per annum for the next 3 years, and even in that, you're allowing for 460 million per annum to be achieved by income generation, and you won't tell us what you're talking about. We had a black hole here last year, the day of the budget in health, and the HSE blew it out of the water within 24 hours. We've seen the freedom of information. I probably know what has happened. You made sure there's nothing on a file to be FOI'd for the coming year, but we do know. And these are your figures that I read out to you. There's a black hole of 460 million in the estimate alone, which you said they will be provided when the revised estimate. Today is the day we need to know what's happening for next year, not in a couple of months' time. And there's a black hole in the health estimate, and you failed to grapple with it. You didn't grapple with the last minister, and this minister has got the bestie as well. And we'll be back here again next year with another supplementary estimate for health again, like we've done on every single budget you have brought in. You have never brought in a health estimate since you became Minister for Public Expenditure that stood the test of 12 months. Always within next June and July we'll know about the overrun. Minister, why do you year in, year out bring in a health estimate that you cannot stand over? You've never presented a true or a fair or an accurate health estimate, and this year is no different. And I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg of the figures we've been able to glean here in an hour's notice, and you're not providing us even with the further information. And the information will come out, and that income of the 460 million black hole will have to be found. And of course you're going to magic it away. You'll magic it away from growth. There are 460, and I refer you back to say, page 8. Minister, I want to leave the party politics, because things are too serious in the health. Minister, I believe that the essential health services need to be looked after, but nowhere this is more truer than in the crucial issue of suicide. Suicide remains the nation's silent killer. There's not a community, not to mind a family, that hasn't been affected in it. And there's nothing in this to help suicide victims. Nothing whatever. And it is particularly hard on young men. Some of the suicide, Minister, there are 10 suicides a week on your watch, and you're doing nothing about it. And the situation is getting worse. And most of those people are young males in the 15 to 19 age group packet. And some measures by this government have specifically contributed to both the suicide and the homelessness situation. On the suicide, young people leaving school, and especially young males, not knowing their worth and place in society, you took away the guidance counsellors from them in the school, and they left not prepared for the outside world. Then when they left, you cut, in your term here, you cut their job seekers allowance when they were 18 or 19 from €188 to €100 a week. Then your local authorities refused to let them on a housing list because they told them there's room in their parents' attic, or they could find room in their parents' house. And then when they had to leave the parents' house, you wouldn't give them rent supplement because you wouldn't put them on a housing. And no wonder they're homeless, and no wonder there are addiction issues, and there's nothing in this dealing with the suicide issue. As I said, we've also seen that the services and the people dealing with suicide are totally stretched, and in fact 40% of people who've committed suicide have been in touch with the overstretched National Suicide Office seeking help, but the help wasn't being able to solve the problem, and we all know how difficult it is. But, Minister, tax cuts for the rich is your answer to the suicide problem, and I say shame on this government the way you're doing it. I'd also say, when it comes to speech and language therapists for the young children in the school who need it at their formative years, again you've cut back on that. Also the elderly people who many of them have had a stroke. You've cut back on the speech and language therapies because they need occupational therapists as well to get them back up on their feet. I mentioned the medical card fiasco, last year's figure, trundling on. Today, I've had a constituent on to me saying, you have an appeal with your office in Ballyshannon, and the appeal is in there 10 months. 10 months. And they had a discretionary medical card, they're appealing it, and the appeal is going on 10 months. Probably took 2 or 3 months to deal with the original application, and now the 10. We were used to these extended delays when it came to some social welfare payments, but it's now a new procedure to have it in the appeals office for the Department of the HSE dealing with medical cards. Minister, or Taoiseach, as you're the only one there from the government at this stage, I want to move on to the issue of housing and the increase in social housing over the last 6 years. There's now 90,000 families on the housing list. The proposed central bank change. Oh, no. You're wasting my time. You're wasting my time. No, you'll get it. Taoiseach, you might be good enough to tell us where the 2 ministers who came in here are. I suspect they're gone off to talk to the media to give them a full briefing that they withheld from their office. I'd love to know where they are. There will be details on the 6 o'clock news from their press conference. Where are they?
They're broadcasting to the nation at the moment.
Yeah.
Deputy Fleming has the floor.
Count Corla, last Count Corla, I'm asking you, last Count Corla, I'm just on a point of order, last Count Corla, I'm asking you,
sorry, please.
Count Corla, I'm asking you, last Count Corla, for next year, in advance of the budget, we want the commitment that the 2 respective ministers will sit here to at least have the courtesy to hear what the opposition have to say. And if that can't be delivered, there should be a question about them being asked to deliver. Let him deliver his script on the national media or whatever TV channel he's on. This is the place to deliver it, and this is the place to listen to the response. And it's broadcast here, it's on 2 channels, as we know, it's on RT. But it's a disregard to the entire democratic process in relation to this budget as the biggest statement of the year, and ministers feel they can at least walk away and not listen to what's going on.
Thank you,
back to the housing situation. The proposed central bank changes to mortgage requirements will compound the problems in relation to young people getting their houses. Home ownership will be concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, and the majority of people will have to pay increased rent while this is going on. And there is a full section, and it's the only section in the Minister's speech I actually want to refer to here today, when he talks about, I'm today announcing $2.2 billion for social housing provision in the next 3 years. He's going to give some of it between now and 2017. Then he's going to give $300 million to a public-private partnership yet to be established and dreamt up. Why not do the direct route and do it through the capital expenditure programme? And then he's looking to do some off-balance sheet finance vehicle will provide at least $400 million from 2015 onwards to approved housing agents. Minister, I would say, Taoiseach, the government is more interested in off-balance financing mechanisms to deal with critical social problems than dealing with the social problems themselves. If you were determined to deal with the housing issue, you wouldn't have to be running around the house for an off-balance sheet mechanism. Public-private partnership. Since the foundation of the state, the country has been able to build social houses. And now are we outsourcing it to off-balance sheet situations like Irish Water and semi-state companies and special purpose vehicles, as you call it in your speech, and public-private partnership. The housing shouldn't be, the housing programme should not be outsourced to the profiteering end of finance. And the reason I have difficulty, and I don't believe any of those figures, the reason I don't believe any of those figures is NAMA were told to provide houses for local authorities, and they offered, I think, 4,000 houses, 2,000 of which were rejected by local authorities. I bet NAMA will be able to sell them very comfortably in the private, through private sales, but again there will be no protection for the taxpayer, whereas local authorities didn't take them up. And out of that 2,000 that have been accepted, I understand only 700 have been taken up. So I don't believe the commitment of this government to social housing, because we wouldn't have the level of homelessness if you were actually serious about it. Now, I do say, and I'm sorry the Minister is not here, because I could say a lot on homelessness, but instead, I will give way to Father Peter McVerry, who spoke at a conference last Friday, to which the Minister for Public Expenditure himself attended. And Father Peter McVerry captured it very well at the conference last Friday when he said, "I am absolutely dismayed at the idea that the tax cuts are going to be at the top rate of tax, because basically it's not helping people at the lower end of the wage scale. The problem of people sleeping on the street could be solved by Christmas." That's coming from a man that we all know and respect, and is capable of dealing with the issue. And if he is saying that, what is the government's response? We'll have public-private partnerships in 2017. We'll have enough balance sheet financial vehicle in 2017. We'll have a special purpose vehicle in 2017. If you give Father Peter McVerry and the other organisations the money, and you stepped aside and got out of the way with your special funding measures in 2017, it solved the problem for you in a few months. It solved the problem. It brings me on now to the issue of water charges. How much time have I left?
9 minutes remaining.
9 minutes. I want to talk about water charges. And look, at the government, we know you're trying to wash your hands of the debacle you made of this, but your hands are dirty, and no amount of washing and hand-wringing will get you out of this hole at this stage. And you know households will have bills where their 2 adult children are €482 per annum. And all of the funds in the first 2 years are going to fund the 500+ staff super quango, and that is consuming 180 million set-off costs, together with the cost of installing the meters. So all the revenue from the first 2 years of the domestic water customers is going solely on the set-up costs of the super quango, and you have proposed to abolish quangos in your last election manifesto. Not only did you not honour that, but you did it with knobs on it. You made the biggest quango in living memory in this country by setting up Irish Water. And your measures here today are, they're a hit and a miss. There's measures there to help people on social welfare payments and people who are in receipt of the household benefits package and the fuel allowance, and there's also a measure for tax credits. Now, I have to say about what's on offer for the tax credits, I've looked at the figure. There's not a bob in the kitty next year for anyone getting a tax credit, because you have to claim it a year in arrears. So probably about 2017 or 18, some people might be lucky to get something back from that. However, there's one group that you missed, and again I'm quoting your figures here today. In the Minister of Finance's own booklet today, he says there are 880,700 people, income earners, exempt from income tax because they're below the threshold to pay income tax because they're covered by their tax credit. Those people will not get the benefit of what's on offer to people on social welfare, and they won't be in a tax situation to get a tax rebate in a year. So there's 870,000 families not going to be able to avail of this here today, because they're not on social welfare and they're not in the tax brand, and they are the low-paid, hard-pressed families that once again you've ignored. And the Minister, Taoiseach, who's gone out, tried to send her text saying she's interested in low-paid families. They are the low-paid families. They are the only group excluded. Think about it, Taoiseach. The only group excluded. Practically half the households in Ireland, there's about 1.6 million households in Ireland. You're giving something to a couple of 100,000 families on social protection, and you're giving a tax credit to people on the tax rate, but half the houses of Ireland are not in the income tax rate because they're on salaries of 20,000, 30,000 in that bracket, and the tax credits for the family results in them not being in the tax bracket, and there's nothing in there for the low-income families. Shame on you. And I don't think any bit of messing around is going to solve this problem. In relation to the overcrowded classrooms and the vote in the Department of Education, every one of us here have been in classrooms in recent months with 31, 32 and 33 children. And as a first step, we have proposed a reduction in the pupil-teacher ratio in primary schools from 28 to 27 commencing next year. And this would reduce class sizes. Everybody understands class sizes, but ye talk about meeting demographic demand, and all you're talking about is trying to stay still. And that means you are telling the children in classrooms where there's 32, 33 and 34, stay there until 2017, and we'll give the well-off parents in the community a tax cut. That's your answer to everything here today. I want to move on in relation to social inclusion. And also, Minister, you've done nothing on the small schools schools in rural areas in relation to the cuts you made to their class sizes in those areas. I do welcome the measures, Minister, about where people going back to work will be able to retain the child dependence allowance that they have on social welfare. That was an employment wedge, and I do welcome that. But then I look at other young people who want to get into the labour market and apprentices, and we have now a record low number of 7,000 apprentices in the country. There should have been 40,000 people in apprenticeship scheme. But last year, you introduced a measure whereby apprentices who run about €200 a week have to pay €900 for their 10 weeks break to go to the Institute of Technology to do the education part of the course. You're taking back half the money you're giving them to pay back the third-level fees, and that's in line with your increase in third-level fees, which you're continuing to roll out, and you're making it very difficult for people on that situation. Two other topics I want to deal with: the sale of state assets and helping Irish businesses. The government has talked about a yield of approximately 2 or 3 billion from the sale of state assets over the last couple of years. Last Thursday in the Dáil, the ministers confirmed receipt of 150 million from Bord Gáis Energy, 197 million from ESB, and taken in conjunction with the 405 million mentioned here from the privatisation of the National Lottery licence, it means you've received 752 million from the sale of state assets during the course of the last 12 months. And the biggest portion of this, of course, was the sale of the National Lottery licence, which was to have been ring-fenced for the National Children's Hospital. But the Minister confirmed that much of the overall proceeds received from the sale of state assets here last Thursday morning have gone to a range of projects including resurfacing regional roads, footpaths, preparation of public-private partnerships for roads and education projects, energy-efficient works in local authority housing, social housing and tourism-related work. This does beg the question: when work starts on the new Children's Hospital during the lifetime of the next government, where will the ring-fence funding be at that stage? And the Minister seems intent on using the proceeds of sale of state assets for various pet projects around the country. He also confirmed that the sale of Bord Gáis Ireland realised over €1 billion. But he's only taken in 150 million of it today, and the timing of the receipt of the other 900 million, he said, is to be decided by the government. Again, it begs the question: is there money being held out there somewhere to be brought into the government coffers for a series of further pet projects to buy votes in the run-up to the general election? I thought, naively and all as I am, that the era of auction politics is over. But clearly it now appears you are buying people's votes with the proceeds of the sale of their family silver, and that's central to government policy. Finally, Taoiseach, directly comment to yourself, Taoiseach. I raised this with you here 2 years ago. I asked you about the Construction Contractors Act. It was passed here in summer 2013, brought forward by Senator Fergal Quinn. The legislation was passed and signed into law on the 29th of July 2013 by the President. And I asked you exactly 2 years ago, when you were sitting there, when the other ministers had disappeared, I asked you to activate that legislation, and you said you would do so. 2 years on, you have not done so. So I'm asking you, I've given up on Minister Howlett and Harris and Hayes and all those people responsible, and I'm asking you once again, will you please resolve the internal wrangling that is going on over this issue and commence this legislation forthwith? Because we do want to help Irish businesses, and under EU procurement law, your government National Procurement Office has said the average amount of tenders won by companies within a state within the EU for government-funded tenders is 98.6%. Ireland, we're just over 95%. Have you got that? And within EU procurement guidelines, it is possible to dramatically improve this situation. We need to tender smart, and we need to tender clever. Other countries can do so to make sure their companies get the contract, and we must learn from them. And listen to this, Taoiseach, this will surprise you, should embarrass you actually. Minister Howlett said here last Thursday in question time, when I asked the reasons why so much procurement contracts are given outside the state of Ireland is because, and wait for it, this is what the Minister said last Thursday. His own words, and I'm quoting from the Dáil record: the vast majority of public procurement opportunities in Ireland are advertised in English, which makes it easier for our tender documents accessible to businesses across Europe for whom English is their preferred second language. So, Minister, clearly if the Germans, French, Italians and Spanish can find a way out of making sure every other country can easily read their tender documents, I'd ask you to take and to do it for the advantage of their own domestic businesses in their own country, and they're doing it within EU procurement rules. I'm asking Taoiseach to ensure that our Minister gets a little bit clever on this one. Do what the Germans do what the French do what the Italian, Spanish and every other country does for 98.6% of government contract, and don't be left around. Because you know we have a procurement budget each year of 12 billion. 9 billion of it is in current expenditure, 3 billion of it is capital expenditure, and for every 1% you can shove that up over 95%. It's an additional €120 million staying in the country and not going to foreign companies.
Thank you,
and this must be tackled if we're serious about keeping jobs at home. I conclude with that. This is a budget for the rich, and the haves and the have-nots to be left out.